There's so many ways to select hair in Photoshop, but don't you think that there's not one technique that works for every scenario? It is just not possible, right? Because if you look at hair, it can be simple, it can be complex. On top of that, the background can be a variety of different things. It can be busy, it can be blurred, maybe colored, white, black. There are so many possibilities. And to make it even more complex, the hair can be red, green, blue, black, white, salt and pepper. And then we have to think about how that hair color combines with the complexity of the background, right? With so many different variables and thousands of different tutorials on selecting hair in Photoshop, you can look that up on YouTube. I can understand that this can become extremely confusing, and it is confusing for me as well sometimes. So in this video, I've tried to make an ultimate guide where we will explore the best technique for selecting and masking hair in every single situation. I hope this one helps, and trust me, it's simple and it all starts with contrast. Whenever you have an image where you have to cut out the hair, we just need to ask ourselves this very simple question. Is there contrast between the hair and the background? In other words, is there any kind of separation between the hair and the background? Answer this question in yes or no. Let's see some examples. Look at this example. The background is busy, the hair is busy, and there's no way Photoshop can tell the difference between a grass in the background and a strand of hair, right? So in this specific case, don't you think we can clearly say that there's very minimal contrast between the hair and the background? Feel free to disagree in the comments. The hair is red and then there's flower in the background, there are leaves, busy background, just making it difficult for Photoshop to make a separation. So our answer is no. Let's move on to second example. In this case as well, even though the background is simple, there is no contrast between the hair and the background. You cannot even tell where the edge of the hair stops and the edge of the background begins. So here as well, the answer is no, because it's black hair on black background. If it was white background and black hair, there would be contrast. Let's take a look at example number 3. Here, the answer definitely is yes. There is contrast, there is separation between the hair and the background. As you can clearly see, the background is brighter, the hair is darker, the background is white, the hair is black. So it's very easy to figure out where the edge of the hair is and where the background begins. So there clearly is a contrast. Let's take a look at our last example. In this case as well, we can tell between the hair and the background. Why? Because the background is of a different color than the hair. The background is blue, the hair is black, so there's contrast of color. In this case, there's contrast of brightness. In this case, there's no contrast. In this case as well, both are busy, so there's no contrast. Why are we asking this question? If the answer is yes, we can move further down the flowchart. But if the answer is no, there's only one technique that we can apply here, and that is the hairbrush technique. The way it works is pretty simple, but do know that it's time consuming. By the way, if you want to go ahead and follow along using any of the photos in the video, check the links in the description. It is a simple situation where Photoshop cannot tell the difference between the hair and the background, so we as artists have to create that edge. And the way we create that separation from scratch is with the help of a couple hair brushes. By the way, you can download them using the link in the description or simply use this link. To have more headroom, you expand the hair a little bit using Liquify, and then with the pen tool, make a selection, stay a little inside. Now create a mask out of it. Once you have a mask, with the help of the hair brushes, paint back in those edges. You can also create a brand new layer and sample a color from the hair, and on top of that, draw some random hair. That's all up to you. If you do wish to use the hairbrush technique, you can choose to watch these complete guides in absolute detail as to how to go about them. They have step-by-step detail of every information that you might need. We cannot cover every detail in this video because we have so many techniques to cover, but if you feel lost, don't worry, I'm there to guide you, of course, if you let me. So moving on to the very first question that we asked ourselves, and that was, is there a contrast between the hair and the background? If the answer is no, we know we need to use the hairbrush technique. But if the answer is yes, again, there's one more question. We need to ask ourselves, what type of contrast is there between the hair and the background? Is it brightness? Is it color? Or is it a mix of both? If it's just regular brightness, like if there's a sky in the background or a light colored backdrop, I recommend using the Select and Mask workspace. So this image falls into that category. So you have two options. You can either choose any of these tools like the Object Selection, Quick Selection, and the Magic Wand, and then click on Select Subject. You have a selection, and then create a mask. It uses the Select and Mask, then click on the Mask button. It does possibly the same thing, but if you do want more control, I recommend even before doing this, just go to Select and Mask workspace. So while you have any selection tool selected at the top, you would see Select and Mask. Click on that and do all your selections inside it, because inside it you also have Select Subject. So click on Select Subject and you have the option to see your selection on different kinds of backgrounds. So let's say if we want our view to be on white, So if the opacity is at 100%, everything that is selected shows up and everything that is not selected is in white. If you decrease the opacity to 0, everything shows up irrespective of what you have selected or what you haven't. Let's increase the opacity back to 100%. If you're not happy with the selection, you can play with some of these settings, or if there are some areas where it didn't get the selection right, you can use the refine edge tool right here. So let's zoom in and we can clearly see that the selection right here is not absolutely perfect. So just paint over that and it gets it right. Now, on top of that, you can also shift the edge if you wish to. So I can shift the edge a little further. If the hair selection is not refined properly, you can also try clicking on Refine Hair. And it also does a fantastic job. And on top of that, I would shift the edge a little bit to the right and also choose to decontaminate colors. Sometimes what happens is the background can be a little colorful, like it was the sky and the background was blue, and the hair is usually so thin, in almost all cases of course, even mine, that it takes up the color of the background. So you might want to check decontaminate colors sometimes, and it does a good job. And then you can move forward from there. We also have a complete dedicated guide on this topic, which you can watch right here. By the way, this video is a guide to guide you to which technique to use in what scenario. Now, if the backgrounds are extreme, like white or black, in other words, the background can be black and the hair can be brighter, or the background can be white and the hair can be darker, in those cases, it is much more practical to just use blend modes. It's one of the best ways to mask hair. It maintains every strand of hair. We'll see. So in this case, you can clearly see that the background is nearly white. It's not completely white, but we can make this work. So let's zoom in. Have a look at the strands right here. If you used select subject, it wouldn't be that nice. So let's try making a background by creating a solid color adjustment layer. Let's create a bright blue background, something like that. Hit OK and put it under the subject. First of all, let's unlock the background layer by clicking on the lock right there, and let's take it under. Now, with the subject layer selected, let's try select subject first. Let's see what it does. And now when you create a mask, have a look. It's okay, but a lot of the strands are gone. So to prevent it, we're going to use blend modes. Let's start it from the beginning. So here we have our subject layer and here we have our background. So first of all, we need to make a duplicate of the subject layer. So with the subject layer selected, press Ctrl or Command J to make a duplicate. The first one is normal and the second one is multiply. Now, as the name suggests, we're going to change the blend mode according to that. Okay, so let's turn off the normal for a second. And for the multiply layer, change the blend mode to, guess what? You are a genius. Change it to multiply. Now, as we do that, have a look around the edge. All of the hair on the strand is visible. Now, this will work if the background is brighter and the hair is darker. When I say brighter, I mean the extremes, like closer to white, or you can actually experiment with anything. These are just guidelines. If it's other way around, however, if the background is darker and the hair is brighter, use a different blend mode, and that is green. We're gonna get back to that later, but for right now, let's focus on this one. So as you can see, every strand is visible, but the blue of the background is also going through the subject. And if it was even a tad bit darker, it would make the subject darker as well, because we have chosen the blend mode multiply and it just darkens. So to bring back everything in the middle and just use the edges for the multiply layer, let's turn on the normal one. And in this one, you can use select subject. With any of these three tools selected, the object selection, the quick selection, and the magic wand, at the top, click on select subject. You can use any of your selection methods to make a selection and then click on the mask button. Now you have the best of both worlds. You have the middle part properly selected and you have all of the strands around the edge properly selected as well. When you do select subject, it might also bring in some bits and pieces from the old background. So what do we do now? We just erase around the edges. We don't want to disturb the original mask. So select this layer, press Ctrl or Command G, put it in a group and create a mask for that group. That way you have two masks for the same layer. Now take a brush, take a soft round brush, black as the foreground color, and just around the edge, just paint in black. That's all. Opacity and flow at 100. There you go. That edge is taken care of. Have a look right here. So simple. Similarly right here as well. Done. Perfect. Now when you do change the blend mode of this layer to multiply, it also brought in the original shadow from the original image. Now if you don't want it, you can create a mask of this layer as well. So click on the mask button and erase that area out. Don't worry about this edge right there because that is selected perfectly with the normal layer. All right. So let's go to the mask of the multiply and paint it in black. If you do want to remove the shadow, sometimes you might want to keep it. We'll get to that later. But for right now, let's take it away. There you go. Now, as you can take a look, if I turn this off and turn this on again, it's also making the blue a little darker. So to control it, you can create what? A curves adjustment layer, right? So let's click on the adjustment layer icon and then choose curves. We want to limit the curves just to the multiply layer. Otherwise, whatever you do will also affect the background. We don't want that. So click on this button. That way it will create a clipping mask. Look at this sign. It means that it's limited to the multiply layer. And now you can control it. So let's zoom in, make sure we are not hurting the strands. Let's take the rightmost slider to the left, just like this. If we take it too further away, have a look, the strands are going. So you have to be careful, just like this. And there you have it. So without it, see, it's making it slightly darker. With it, it's perfectly normal. Now, there might be scenarios where this shadow can actually be very beneficial. So let's say you were to introduce a wall. So let's drag this wall and drop it into Photoshop. Let's make it larger, just like this, and put it under the multiply layer. There you go. Now, if you turn the mask off, the shadows will come back, and just as the shadows come back, this begins to look natural. But there's one problem here. If you look at the wall, the light on the wall is coming a little bit from the right-hand side, and the light on the subject is coming from the left-hand side. So let's invert the wall, press Ctrl or Command T, right-click on it, and then choose Flip Horizontal. Now it begins to just look fantastic. Take a look at it. Isn't that super amazing? I would even go further to make the shadow even darker. So let's go to the curves adjustment layer, make it normal, and actually, let's make it darker like that. There you go. It looks even better. When it comes to colors, values, and concepts, Photoshop is like physics. But when it comes to creating art with Photoshop, don't you think it's more like chemistry because it's full of exceptions? All right. Now, we talked about what to do if the background was white and the hair was dark. But what if it's the opposite? What if the background is black and the hair is brighter? We have already covered it in this detailed guide. We use the screen blend mode, and you can watch this complete guide on how to go about it. We do the exact same process, but with the blend mode changed to screen instead of multiply. Now keep in mind again, there's a complete guide on using both multiply and screen, and all of these videos are also linked in the description. Now, what technique should we use if the color separates the background from the hair? You see, this is a difficult question for me to answer because a few versions ago, I would have asked you to just use the color range, and it makes the most logical sense because it selects a target color. And let's try color range first, but it's not that effective. Let's test it. Let's go to select and then color range. Now, it would make sense to you to just choose sample color and select the first eyedropper and click on an area of the color that you want to select, okay? And then decrease the fuzziness and select the surrounding areas as well. First of all, let's change the selection preview to none. And let's click on the plus eyedropper. Let's add all of these colors, okay? Now, as we begin to increase the fuzziness, it's going to select the background. If you want to see a preview, let's choose, let's say, white matte. So whatever is selected would be shown, and whatever that is not selected would be in white. We have already covered this in select and mask, right? It's very similar. So you can go ahead and increase the fuzziness and also invert the mask because that's actually what we want. But if you have a look around the edge, it's not as good. Even if you take the first eyedropper and select this only color, if you try to increase fuzziness, in this area it seems nice, but it's very rough on the other side and it's just not perfect. And if you somehow increase the fuzziness like this and try to cover every area, have a look, a lot of the strands on the left-hand side is gone. So what technique should we use? Even I tried select and mask, even that takes away a lot of hair. So let's go to select and mask, let's click on select subject, and even then, if you go ahead and choose on white, take a look. A lot of the strands are gone. It's much better than color range, but again, strands are gone. Even if you try the refine edge and try to paint over it, see, they don't really come back that nicely. See? So what should we use? Well, it's a combination of traditional old channels method along with select and mask, particularly select subject inside of select and mask. Here's how to go about it. So let's go to channels, and by the way, if you cannot see channels here, let's go to window and make sure channels is checked. All right. And now let's go through all of these channels, red channel, green channel, and blue channel, and figure out which channel has the most difference or the most contrast between the hair and the background. And in this case, we can clearly see since the original background was blue, blue channel has the most contrast. So make a copy of the blue channel. Let's drag it and drop it right here on the plus icon. So now we need to make sure that the background is absolutely white and the hair is as dark as possible. we can take care of the rest. All right, so press Controller Command L for levels. This is one of those rare scenarios where I actually use levels. Don't hate me for it. But you can also use curves here as well. Controller Command M, that's also equally usable. Anyway, Controller Command L for levels. Now take the slider on the rightmost side to the left. And just when you begin to lose the hair, stop. So just about right there, you need to find that sweet spot. We are losing all of the hair on the left-hand side, so we might have to take it a little bit to the right. This seems to be a nice place to be at. You can also play with these sliders, make the hair as dark as possible. Okay, there you go. Now, we don't have to make it absolutely black and have all of the halo show up. This is all right. Hit OK once you're satisfied. Now we can make a selection based on this channel, but we don't have to do it now. Let's go back to RGB, let's go back to our layers, make 2 copies again. So here we have the background layer, press Ctrl or Command J. So the first one is the regular, and the second one would be using channels. Okay, we also unlock the layer, just double click on it, name the layer, it will also be unlocked. And under it, you can create a background. Let's create a white background and put it under both. Let's turn off the regular for now. Let's just focus on the channels. Now let's go to channels and make a selection based on the blue copy, this one that we created. Hold the Control or Command and click on the thumbnail of this channel to make a selection based on that. So the brighter the areas, the more that area would be selected. The darker the area, the lesser that area would be selected. We want just the opposite of that. So to invert the selection, press Ctrl-Shift-I, Command-Shift-I. All right. Now, with the channels layer selected, click on the mask button. Now take a look at the mask. It is pretty amazing, isn't it? All of the strands are covered. Again, it's not perfect. A lot of it is going through if you look at it. If you turn off the white background, have a look. A lot of this is transparent as well. And for that, we have the regular layer. Let's turn on the regular layer. Click on Select Subject. You can use any selection method that you like. Just to select the insides and click on the mask button. You have your regular, and you also have all of these strands right here as well with the channels. So if I turn that off, strands go away. If I turn that on, strands come back. Now, as you can tell, this is not perfect. A lot of halos, a lot of the blues also coming along to give us blues. Don't worry, we're gonna take care of that. I'm with you. So let's go to the mask of the channels. Hold the Alt key or the Option key. Click on the mask of the channels. How do we take that away? Here's the trick. Select the brush, black as the foreground color. No, we are not just simply gonna paint black. Change the blend mode of the brush, not the layer, of the brush to overlay. That way, it will paint less on areas which are closer to white and more on areas which are closer to black. So it will paint more here and less here. So decrease the flow to about 10% and just paint around the hair. Make sure these areas are black. It's not affecting the hair that much. That's what it will do. Left hand side is fine. This is good. Now once you're okay with it, increase the flow to 100, change the blend mode to normal, and then you can cover the rest of the areas. If you want to do it quick, just hold the Controller Command, click on the mask of the regular layer, press Ctrl-Shift-I, Command-Shift-I to invert the mask, and then just simply blast it on. Controller Command D, hold the Alt key or the Option key, click on the mask to see the layer, and there you go. The problem here is that the mask is fine, but it's also bringing along a lot of blues. So how do we take care of that? Pretty simple. Make a group of both of these, so regular and the channels. Hold the Controller Command, also select the regular, press Controller Command G. Now on top of it, we're going to create a brand new layer. The problem here is the color, right? So all we have to do is to sample this color and paint. And we need to limit that just to the hair. So hold the Alt key, the Option key, and click on this button. That way it will be limited just to the hair. Somehow accidentally I've increased the smoothing. Let's decrease it back to 0. So you can either paint it, or if you just want to change the color, change the blend mode from normal to color. There you go. So sample this color and paint. Sample and paint. How easy it is. Sample and paint. And that way you can take care of the rest of the mask. If you have painted extra right here, simply erase it. No big deal. And that, my friend, is pretty much done. By the way, if you only wanted the channels layer just for the hair areas and not for the body, because sometimes it can create some outlines that you didn't want, just open up the group, go to the channels, mask right here, and just erase the extras. So hold the Alt key or the Option key, click on the mask, take the brush black as the foreground color, and take it off. That's all. Hold the Alt key or the Option key, click on the mask again, and boom. You won't have those weird outlines. You still have a little bit of it. Again, how do we take care of that? We already learned it in this video. But just to give you a short refresher, select the smudge tool right here. Strength 20 is fine. And you can just push it in slightly. There you go. There you go. That's how easy it is to do it. You can also contract the selection, you can fill it. Again, there's lots of tutorials on filling up halos and taking care of it. You can watch them right here, linked in the description. Last but not the least, if the contrast between the hair and the background is a mixture of both brightness and color, like in this case, just start with select and mask. So you can just select any of these 3 selection tools and click on select subject, that works too. Or go into select and mask and refine it further. Click on the mask button once the selection is active and it usually does a pretty good job. If not, you can go into select and mask, choose decontaminate colors, work with all those settings, and after that you can always manually adjust the mask as well. You can hold the Alt key, the Option key, go to the mask, use the overlay technique that we just learned in this to refine it, but in this case we don't really need it. In all of these techniques, excluding the hairbrush technique, because in the hairbrush technique we create our own edge. So in all of these techniques, sometimes you might want to refine the mask. It may not be always perfect. So to refine the mask, what do? We use the overlay technique. What is the overlay technique? That is simply changing the blend mode of the brush to overlay and then painting on the mask with a lower flow. We have already covered it in this lesson. So if you select the brush, go to the mask, and then if you zoom in, let's say we change the blend mode to overlay. No matter how much you paint on the black areas with white, it just won't paint. Or no matter how much you paint in the white areas with black, it just won't paint. When you have the overlay blend mode selected and the color on the brush is black, it will paint more on the areas which are closer to black and less on the areas which are closer to white. So right now black is selected, right? So if you go to this mask and have a look, if we paint on this area, you would notice that it's painting more on the darker areas and very less or absolutely not on areas which are absolutely white. The more darker it is, it's painting more on those areas. Now this image looks a little scary, I understand that, sorry about it, but it's a good example. Similarly, if you have white as the foreground color and you try to paint on black, it won't paint. But if you try to paint on an area which is closer to white, it will paint more. The less and less closer it is to white, the less it will paint. And on top of that, if you have a lower flow, it gives you more control. So in this area, some of the background is still showing up. So we would go with 10% flow, blend mode overlay, and paint here with black. It takes care of that. If we directly painted it without overlay, see what would happen. It also covers up the hair as well. But if the blend mode is overlay, it will paint less on the brighter areas and absolutely won't paint on areas which is 100% white. So now when I paint it, even if I accidentally try to paint inside, it just won't let me paint. So by now we have talked about selecting the hair in all of the different scenarios. We have talked about refining the mask. One major thing that we just cannot ignore is removing halos. When it comes to masking here, we just cannot forget about it. No matter how good of a mask you have, except for the hairbrush technique and the blend modes technique, no matter how good the mask is, it will carry the color of the previous background. And if the previous background is too colorful and the new background is very drastic in color in comparison to previous background, it will definitely show up. The hair is so thin, especially around the edges, that it will take in the color of the old background, and those are halos that we need to take care of. So there are 3 ways to remove halos in Photoshop. The first one we already covered. We simply created a new layer and we started brushing with the color of the hair. We took a sample of the color of the hair and we painted there and changed the blend mode of that layer to color. That's the first method. The second technique is simply filling it up with paint, and the third technique is using the clone stamp tool. I'm going to show you an example where we're going to use both. So first of all, let's make a selection of the subject. We have our new background right here. So click on select subject at the top and let's click on the mask button. Now as you can see, it's bringing in the color of the older background. If we simply try to create a brand new layer and clipped it and changed the blend mode to color here, it might not work. Sometimes when the brightness of the new background is different, it just doesn't work. So if you take a sample and you try to paint right here with the color blend mode, let's increase the flow. It kind of doesn't work. There are still gaps here. See? It just looks awkward. So that technique won't work. So let's simply try filling it up, and here's how you do it. Starts the same. You create a new layer and keep the blend mode to normal. Hold the Alt key or the Option key and click on the line between these 2 layers. Clip it just the way we did before and fill it. Now when you fill it, keep in mind that we have to fill the outside hair only. For the inside, we're going to use the clone stamp tool. So let's zoom in, hold the Alt key or the Option key, click to take a sample. If you cannot take a sample, let's go to the eyedropper. Make sure sample all layers or current and below is selected. Sample size can be 3x3 or 5x5. Let's not choose point sample, otherwise it can sample a grain or a color that you didn't want. 5x5 average is fine. Take the brush, hold the Alt key or the Option key, click to take a sample, and just paint on the outside areas. Instantly, it's taken care of. Take a sample and paint on the outside. Now, why am I asking you to not paint on the inside? Because it will make it flat. So if we do it, see, it's just not looking all right. Now you can take your time to do the entire area. And for these inside areas, you use the clone stamp tool. So take the clone stamp tool and hold the Alt key or the Option key, click to take a sample and simply fill it, just like that. Similarly right here as well, hold the Alt key or the Option key, click to take a sample, make sure sample is current and below, and fill up these areas. That's all. And just by doing that, we have taken care of the halos in this small area. So here's the before, as you can see, the previous halos showing up. Here's the after. Here's how we take care of that. Zoom out, take a look, before, after. Now you can do the rest of the areas. Just a reminder, you don't have to remove halos if number 1, you're using the hairbrush technique, and number 2, you're using the blend mode technique. So there you go. That is everything about selecting hair in Photoshop, and these are the techniques that I recommend as of recording this video. You're free to use this video as a guide, and if in future there's an update to the techniques that I recommend, I will mention it in a pinned comment to this video. Thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. It truly means a lot. And to show my gratitude, I wanted to give you something. It might not be that exciting. It's a little boring something, but it may be helpful. So you can download this complete flowchart. It might help you with selection of hair. And along with it, definitely you can download the hair brushes as well. By the way, this is the link to download all of it. This is a secret link, only appears on the screen, not on the description, and only for you who have made to this part of the video. So thank you so much. You are very special. Actually, you're one of the 5% of the audience who make it to the end of the video. It means a lot. And there you go, my friend. That is my attempt at creating the ultimate guide for selecting hair. I hope it was helpful, and if it did help, make sure to give us a like, and also don't forget to subscribe, and not just subscribe, ring the bell so that you, my friend, don't miss any other featured tips, tricks, or tutorials. I would like to take this moment to thank all of these nice and amazing people for supporting PiXimperfect on Patreon and making these videos free for everybody forever. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next one. Till then, stay tuned and make sure that you keep creating. I truly appreciate your time.
Wake up, honey, I made you breakfast. Fresh coffee and bagels too. A new day is waiting for us. We got lots of fun stuff to do.